This is Start, Launch, Grow, brought to you by Million Labs.
Here's what we cover in today's episode. In our catch-up section, we do a deep dive into minimum viable products and explore how minimal is too minimal. Then Simon will sit down with 𝘵𝗵𝗄𝘃, founder of 𝘃𝗵𝗄𝘃, to discuss his Start, Launch, Grow journey. And finally, we wrap up with one clear takeaway. Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. Today we discuss one of the most misunderstood concepts in the startup world, the MVP. And more specifically, how minimal is too minimal?
Yeah, MVP stands for minimum viable product. That kind of term was originally coined by Eric Ries when he wrote The Lean Startup back in 2011. And the idea back then was to build the smallest possible version of your product that still delivers enough value and still allows you to do some testing. But I think the reality of what we see, everyone's interpretation of what minimal is very different. You know, some people are coming to us and they're describing what would be like a full product. Clearly is not minimal. So, you know, that's back to that question is what is minimal?
According to CB Insights, we see that around 42% of startups fail because there's no market need. And as we mentioned in previous episodes, many people tend to skip validation and then fail. But this isn't the only reason we see people failing. So often it's not the idea itself that it's wrong. It's the product never shows enough value for users to care. So in other words, the MVP wasn't built in the right way. And that's exactly what we want to focus on today.
When can you go too low, too limited feature set? When does that become dangerous? And the answer really is when users can't experience that value, as you said, you know, you can't really get feedback because they're like, well, I sort of used it, but it didn't do what I thought it was going to do, or it didn't do X, Y, and Z, and therefore I stopped using it. So you don't get real feedback at that point. So we've identified kind of three areas, at least for this podcast, that we think are most relevant, and we're going to use Airbnb to make this whole thing tangible so you understand.
And if we look at point number one, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that we see is like too minimal means you skipped delivering the core value. And in the example of Airbnb, the core value is being able to find a place to stay and actually book that place, right? So that means your users, they have to view a listing, right? They have to see all of the bookings, and then they have to be able to check out and make the booking. Everything else, when you think about, reviews, like bookmarking or messaging, that's all secondary and that comes next. So you as a founder, you always have to ask yourself, what is the most important feature that drives the core value of my product? And once you have identified that, then you need to make sure that your users can complete that core action in your app. If they're not able to do that, then your MVP is too minimal.
The second point really is around usability, often referred to as UX. Even if we built out the features for Airbnb, if the user can't easily understand how to navigate, how to find the listing, how to filter the listing, how to find the property they're looking for, click on it, view the details, and then check out or make that booking, then you're going to see massive drop-offs somewhere in that flow because people just give up. Everyone's threshold is very low these days. So if the usability isn't there, then actually you're not going to be testing anything. All you've done is prove that you haven't got the UX right or the usability right. And so that, again, is a dangerous situation to be in it. So the kind of question we're asking is, would a new user be able to understand what to do without me sat there behind them, sat over their shoulder, explaining, no, click there, do that. They need to be able to do that on their own.
Just adding to what you've said, Simon, I think what we see is that a lot of people really care about the UI, right? So about the logos and the colors and so on. But actually, our experience is that the UX or the user experience matters even more. So this simplicity, right? Like this, making it super intuitive. And what really helps is if you build something and you're not sure about, is it right? Is it wrong? You could just give it to a friend or someone who hasn't seen the application before, and just do a bit of a check with them how intuitive it is.
So if we just recap that, we've got an MVP, so a minimum viable product. It's not about building as little as possible. It's about building just enough. And that's, that Goldilocks piece. It's just enough to make this work. And the number one point is it's enough for your users to experience the real value that you're trying to provide. And so you need to clearly identify which features provide that value. So as you said earlier, like reviews and maybe bookmarking and all these other things, tend not to be the real value. They're nice to have features, but they're not core features. In Airbnb, the core feature is, can I find a property? Can I book a property? Everything else is kind of superficial and is kind of nice to have, maybe version 2 features, not MVP features. Point 2, is there enough for them to understand how to use it? Is the UI UX good enough for them to be able to use it and get through that flow? And then third, is there enough for you to learn from their behavior so you can capture the right data? Can you figure out what you need to add next? And is there really market demand here? Because that's what we're really testing here, is what's the demand for this product?
Good. Then I would say, Simon, let's dive into your chat with Nick and see what a minimal viable product he built back then.
Big warm welcome to Nick Holzer, founder and CEO of 𝘃𝗏. Nick, just give us the kind of elevator pitch on 𝘃𝗏, what it is, what it does.
It's an AI agent that creates or reviews legal documents for free. So tell it what you want and it will do it for you. We actually found lots of people use it to review legal documents that's sent to them. And it does a better job than ChatGPT or Claude because it basically uses a lot more context about the laws and how documents should be structured and what documents are good and not good and 𝘰𝗵𝗏𝗺 and stuff like that.
Talk us through the start phase. Like, how did you come up with the idea? Where did it come from? I know you're a serial entrepreneur, so this is not your first rodeo. And I think that makes a difference to your kind of journey because you're probably skipping some steps that other founders would have done. But where did the idea come from? Where's the start phase?
Well, so I predicted myself I probably spent about $2 million on legal fees, building, buying, selling companies, basically. And it's not just the money, it's also really slow, which is really frustrating, especially today in the world of AI, but even before the world of AI, when it takes 2 weeks for a lawyer to get your document done, and that is what's holding back a new deal or an employee joining your company or whatever, it's super frustrating. So I set about initially a mission of can we do this cheaper, faster, free with software. And this was really before actually ChatGPT kind of really took off. And we were like focusing more on templates, like how can we make templates free? But now it's much more like how can we have AI agents do as much of it as possible.
And so how far back are we going in that idea phase? This 2 years or something, is it now? 18 months?
Yeah, about 2 years. Initially, it was very much just a few of us in our bedrooms at the weekends and evenings tinkering, playing around, trying different ideas. I tried to also build something around, could you actually replace a law firm and become like a digital law firm? Then kind of transition to, could you make this templates and make templates free? And then, yeah, it kind of got to end of 2024. So just the beginning of 2025, when we put a bunch of stuff out onto Product Hunt. We saw that there was quite a lot of interest. We had, really positive feedback from people that we didn't know, went out to a few friends, and faster than we expected, got an investment round together, raised some capital, and have now taken that to the next level.
Coming out of that idea phase, in terms of like, what did you do to validate that idea? Like, how do you know from your own experience, like, I need a lawyer and I need one quicker than they were providing? And I think we've all been there, like trying to sell a house, for example, is just a nightmare because everyone's blaming the lawyers and somebody's lying, but you're not sure who. How did you validate that piece?
The key kind of examples would be, I need some terms and conditions for my website, or I need an NDA, or and I'm hiring a contractor, I need a contractor agreement. So we basically created a few hundred templates that were totally free on our website, which you could sort of edit easily with some forms that would automatically kind of like fill it out for you and tailor which clause should show up and which one shouldn't. And we built that at, in spare time, stuck it up on Product Hunt. And also, I had a little bit of kind of a profile because of the fact that I had sold 𝘲𝑆C to Samsung and a few other companies before that. So LinkedIn plus Product Hunt, plus of messaging a few friends, hey, what do you think? So see what was the reaction. And that was really kind of where it started. We also did hundreds of user interviews. So just jumping on calls with people, asking them, hey, would you mind coming on a call with me? And some people I saw actually just on the platform, hey, can I talk to you about why you joined it and what you thought of it and what would you like to see in the platform? And that all kind of like gave me confidence that actually what we were solving was not just my problem, but was genuinely something that like people would want to use. And it wasn't just that, right? It was also looking at the market. I spent quite a lot of time looking at the market. So I had a few different ideas before I jumped into this one. And it was really about looking at like, how big is this market? Is there a unique angle that we can take into this market that is different to what everyone else is doing? It's different to ChatGPT or Claude or those, or different to what in our space, 𝗺𝗵𝗵𝗺, the big kind of players servicing law firms are doing, who've raised hundreds of millions or like huge amounts of money. Can we differentiate here? Can we build something unique? Is there a unique angle? And for us, it was actually just like servicing businesses, right? So especially small businesses who 90% of them can't afford or don't choose to afford a lawyer. They basically do it themselves using, well, either just something they've got in their inbox already, or nowadays, ChatGPT or Claude, and they get something out that like sometimes works, but it's a bit different to code, where you can test it, or you can scan it for vulnerabilities and yep, the code is fine. Or like a marketing document where there is not necessarily a right and a wrong. With legal, there is a right and a wrong, and you could get into real trouble, but you don't know until you get it wrong. And you really find that out when there's a problem, i.e. when there's a dispute or you're in court or something really bad happens, right? The level of scrutiny needed is slightly higher. So asking users, finding out whether they're validating that there really is an issue, understanding like what they care about in the product. We found out, for example, they care much more about the trust part is super important. Like they really want to, you have to share with them and build features that kind of use real human knowledge to inform the AI. Otherwise, it's like people still want the human verification when it comes to a serious matter. But like, if you can kind of distill human knowledge into the kind of process, show them how that's been applied, and then that kind of builds trust as well and a better output ultimately.
In terms of that validation process, actually, you did a lot of that at launch. So you built a product of some sort and then used that to help with the validation plus the user interviews. You didn't do loads of sort of what I would call the paper-based validation, like the kind of the desk validation. You went straight into let's build something so that we can put it in front of people and get feedback that way.
I think that's the way to do it nowadays. Like especially today, you can build an app in an hour that's actually really good. I'm also an investor, an angel investor. And when I get literally today, I got a pitch from a founder who said, hey, can you look at my deck to invest? And I was like, have you built a prototype? And they're like, no, I'm going to do that with the money. And I'm like, that's crazy. Like that's not interesting anymore today. That might have like been an idea 3 years ago, but today you can build whatever I could build, whatever I can just literally upload your pitch deck into 𝘪𝘶𝘴, and I can send you a version of your app in half an hour. I think that the price of real feedback using an app is so low and it's so easy to get nowadays. There's no excuse not to do it.
We used to say, the lean methodology, build as very little as you can before to try and test the idea. But you're right, that was because the barrier was higher and the cost was higher and the time was higher. As that's fallen away, you're right, going from start to launch and getting your product into the market and using that as a test just kind of makes sense now, just like it's a no-brainer for all the reasons you just said. So you launched the product into the market, you've done your user testing or user interviews to get that feedback, and you've looked at, I guess, product-specific feedback, like where people are clicking and, all that type of good stuff. In the kind of the growth phase, so going from that first 100 customers, I guess you got a bunch from Product Hunt, you got a bunch from your network. What are the tools that you've used now to get that next phase of growth in there?
Well, so amplitude's really important. Still, user interviews are really important as well. So talking to people. We have some tools like Prolific that actually sort of invite random people into the platform and like video screen their entire process where they ask some questions and they kind of walk through what they're thinking as they're looking at your app. The difference today compared to 5 years ago is you can collect that data with a couple of clicks and you can analyze it with a couple of clicks. It used to be like user interviews, you'd have to invite someone, pay them $100 each to come into your office and sit with them for an hour and a half and provide them tea and coffee and cake, and you do like 4 a day or something, right? And now you can click a button and you'll have like 30 user interviews by the time you wake up. You click a button in the evening, you wake up and you've got them. And then you can just like upload all the transcripts into Claude or ChatGPT or whatever and say like, hey, give me the key highlights. And yes, you can still watch some of the interviews and stuff, but like ultimately you can get data so quickly, so easily. Sometimes it's kind of like painful because you're like, I've just spent all this time building this thing and like people still don't see the difference between what we're building and ChatGPT or Claude or something, right? But those are the lessons, the real hard lessons that you need to learn as quickly as possible of like, what do people really think? And the trick is, how can you iterate as fast as possible? Of course, AI allows us to iterate faster than has ever been possible. It's super exciting. Yeah, it's just make that circle go as fast as possible.
Just go back to those user interviews. You said it's a click away. What are you using a third-party tool to do that? Are you built something internal that says, and what's the incentive for the guys and girls to do the interview or create the video? Because my experience of that has been, it's still quite hard unless there's a proper incentive to get people to bother the time to sit there and talk to I don't know what that button does, and that sort of thing, which is all really valuable. But how are you getting people to do that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so I think you probably received, you, Simon, probably received an email from me, which I sent via Claude, that said, hey, can you fill out a survey about how you think Git law does? And like many others, you didn't respond. And that's normal because people are busy and they've got their own lives. So it's super hard. So yes, we do pay people. And we do it we use two platforms, Listener, which is like 𝘺𝘴𝘶𝗏, and we use Prolific to invite people in to Listener, right? Now, we have actually vibe coded a bunch of stuff as well, because it's really easy to kind of replace parts of that yourself by just like building it in seconds yourself. But we do use those two platforms today, right now. And what happens is we basically pay a couple $100, and it literally is a couple $100. It's not thousands of bucks. It's a couple $100, and we get like 20, 30, 40 responses. And people do get paid. It's not that much through Prolific. It's actually much, much cheaper than you'd usually see. And what people basically get paid for is they get to try out new products at home. I'm not sure how much they actually get paid per survey, but I imagine it's like a couple of bucks. And it's hugely valuable for us because we just click, get the result. And today, with everyone racing, speed is so valuable.
I guess that gives you the feedback for the UI UX piece of it. Like, what does this button do? Don't really understand that. That's great. It doesn't give you the value proposition feedback because they're probably not your customers. I mean, some of them might turn out to be, but they're probably not. So you need this sort of a separate route for getting actual value proposition feedback.
So first of all, we do screen people. So there is screening involved in Prolific, and we do only invite our ICP, as in our ideal customer profile, people who match that to do the survey. However, you're right. The quality is not as high as some other channels. So what we also do is we use Amplitude as like an analytics platform. It connects to Claude, and I sit in Claude. I have some prompts. I just ask Claude, hey, last week, check who did this. If I'm looking at one flow, check who did this and this and this flow. And then I literally say, pull me 20 people I should speak to. And it pulls me 20 people. And I say, write the draft in my Gmail to email them all and ask them for an interview. And it writes the draft. And then I go into the drafts. I just check that I do validate each one myself first before sending it. So I don't want to waste people's time. I just check and go, yep, that person did genuinely do all these things, and that I'm happy with that. Send. It's not fully automated, but it's like 95% automated. And the task moves from like a half day of like work, which feels mentally heavy, to like 5 minutes of half an hour realistically. That actually feels really rewarding because you're going faster with AI.
I think you've got thousands of users now, so congratulations on that. What was harder than you thought, and what's been easier than you thought?
Easier is building, incredibly easy now compared to what it used to be. Whether it's vibe coding in the typical tools, 𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗺 or 𝘫𝗶𝗵 or 𝗵𝗏 or 𝑣0 or whatever, or whether it's actually like vibe coding in Claude Code within VS Code, writing your own code, or whether it's Codex or whatever, all those places, the trick is you give it the context, spend the time onboarding it properly, give it all the information about what you're trying to build and why and how it works, and then you get a really good alpha. Everything's faster. The more difficult part, I think there's two big things that jump out to me. One of them is, I think founder anxiety is real when the world is moving at such a pace and it's never moved faster. And I've been building startups for 15, 20 years. And I sort of sit at the end of the day in bed or whatever and scroll through. I'm just like, oh, wow, there's another 10 people have launched stuff that I should be reading and I should be aware of. Or this is a new model that I should be, every day it feels like there's a bunch of stuff. And it's just impossible to keep up and be productive, right? So how do you balance that? That constant anxiety. The other big difference or thing that I underestimated, I think, is how good the horizontal models are. The horizontal models are incredibly good. As in, I mean by like, ChatGPT, Gemini, and some of the open source stuff. And yeah, all the people around it, basically. Incredibly good. When they have got so much, they're so magnetic in attracting people's attention. So they're always in those tools. So the first place they think of to do something will be in those tools. And they now have connections to so many other services. And they have so much knowledge about you, like context about what you like, and how you talk, and how you want it to talk back, and who your family is, and everything. At least for me, how do you win against that? And then how do you win when I can put in someone else's URL or pitch deck into Lovable and say, build this? Or I could be more complex and I can find a bot that will crawl it all every page and say, clone this. And that's possible today. It will be even easier in 6 months. You'll be able to do it to almost any app how do you win? It's not about how do you get 10 customers or 100 customers. It's how do you build a business that's growing like this, right? And people talk about, oh, well, we're going to have like hundreds of thousands of individual entrepreneurs all building amazing businesses. And you're like, well, the total amount of money in the whole world, to be divided by everyone having a business, everyone's making $80 a month. It's like, great. Everyone's got a really good business there. Obviously not. And that's an extreme scenario. But like the point is, what is the future of building software? Like that is scary. I do have some views on what that is. So like, I hope that there is a future because I'm building one too. I'm working on that, but it is definitely scary as a founder trying to like balance all those thoughts.
It's an interesting challenge around, basically we're all building wrappers now, it feels like, around an existing model of some sort, or maybe multi-models. And yeah, you're only a feature away from being removed because the wrapper goes and does it. But I suspect, and I don't know what your thoughts are, is that although, yes, these models have started, law module, whatever it is, or skill, is that's probably long-term not their core business, and that they will end up specializing into certain market verticals is my guess. But I don't know. What do you think?
The interesting thing is that you basically got these marketplaces, whether it's a personal, your own like set of plugins you can build, whether it's company-wide and it's all your company's plugins, or it's global, and it's like the global marketplace of different plugins you can build. And those exist within the different horizontal areas. Like you can find those marketplaces inside Claude or inside Claude Code or inside ChatGPT. You also have them on GitHub, which basically, things like OpenClaw. There's a whole bunch of those kind of OpenClaw-esque type open source platforms. Like, yes, I agree the foundation models, I'm not going to go into all the different specific verticals, but when you start to pull together all the marketplaces that sit directly in their apps or are very, very close, are open source and free, like where are the big businesses? And there definitely are some really, really big businesses to be made, right? Like, and I think productivity of the world is going to like grow so fast, and there's definitely lots and lots of bright future ahead of us. But when you're building a startup, the problem is not how do I build something that 100 people like? It is initially, but ultimately I have to find something that like 10,000, or depending on how much money you charge, a lot of people are going to pay enough money to make this business very profitable, allow someone else to buy it, or for me to become very profitable as a business and make lots of money, right? That's ultimately one of the goals, unless you're building a charity or a nonprofit or whatever. And that, getting to that goal, not the 100 or 1,000 people that like it, that's easier today than it has ever been. How do you get to like a really big business that's defendable and it's like after you've invested $100,000 or $200,000, how do you then get, or $2 million or 10 million? How do you get to a point where there's ROI on that? And I think that's where the real work is today. It's like understanding the customer, understanding the problem, being able to predict where the market's going, and then building to that. Building something that's cool and looks nice is easier than ever. But that's truly valuable, that's defendable, it's got sustainable competitive advantage. That's the role of a founder, I think, in 2026.
I think we've always known that the challenge is in the go-to-market piece. It always has been. It just felt like it was, as a startup, a founder, you hit a technical hurdle first. Where's my tech co-founder? How much is that going to cost? Now those have all flattened out. You've just hit that earlier and quicker, which is a good thing, but it's still a big barrier and it's still a challenge. And, not everyone's going to get through it. As you say, you can't have $1 million $80 business and they all be sustainable. You can have a lot more niche businesses that sit in a much tighter niche. So, I don't know if it's contract law only or whatever it is, you can have lots of niche businesses, and maybe that's where we end up with lots of niche business rather than like lots of big businesses or a handful of big businesses. Maybe the pyramid gets flattened again. It's no longer Magnificent 7, it's the Magnificent 7,000 or 7 million. I don't know. Who knows?
I 100% agree that the problem is now go to market, and as part of that, understanding what you're going to market with. And you're totally right. That's always where the problem has been. It's never, you could always clone the most successful software businesses out there. What you couldn't clone is their go to market, their user base, the data, all that stuff, right? That makes their product materially better. Not data in some abstract way, but data that like truly adds value to the product in like some kind of like, exponential cycle. Today, it's just that problem, exactly as you said, just becomes apparent so much faster. Super fun getting to like prototype stage, and you can build prototypes in half an hour, and it's great fun getting it to that next stage. That's where the challenge has always been, and now it's like so much faster to get there. But it also requires a lot of tech space, right? Like easy work is building a great prototype. Like that's the easy bit. because it's kind of clear. You don't even have to validate it. I fancy building something. It's still like, let's just go ahead and let's raise some money and let's hire some people. Everyone build. That's all the fun bit. The hard bit is like, oh, I have to get customers. It has to be something people want. If people have to find out about it, people have to then buy it, people have to then pay for it. All those things, really, really hard.
Last thought, what would you like to leave other founders with that are starting their journey? What's like your Yoda advice to them?
Apart from the obvious, which is use the AI tools to the absolute maximum possible and ask every question to an AI first and just be ruthless. They're the most valuable co-founder and idea partner if they're prompted well. Invest significant time into understanding how they work and how to use them well. I still meet founders pitching for investment nonstop who have not done that. And it's so easy. It's almost free to do. That is absolutely what you should do. Other non-obvious thing, I think, is surround yourself in your personal life with people who are supportive. And for me, that's my wife and kids and steady home life, because life building tech software is a roller coaster, and having supportive family and friends is super helpful as well. And that includes mentors or friends or anybody in your kind of personal circle. I think it's definitely, if you've got a good support network, that helps you so much in the process.
Awesome. Well, it was great chatting to you. Thanks for your time, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Simon. Welcome back. Great chat with Nick. So let us know, what is the key learning you got out of the interview?
Yeah, as always, good chat with Nick. Serial entrepreneur, so lots of good value, actually, lots of good detail. But really, I think the thing that I took from it was his focus on talking to customers and getting feedback from customers, whether that's using a product to get people to come in and check the UI, UX, or actually talking to actual customers so that they can get actually valuable feedback on what they should build next, what they should change, etc. So I think that's a really key lesson for us all. Like, go speak to customers, get feedback as quickly as possible.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe for more conversations like this. We also share practical start, launch, grow insights in our newsletter. Thanks for listening and see you next time.